Welcome to the third video in the series of videos that are demonstrating how to make the snake game in Python. And in this video, we're going to be doing three things specifically. We're going to talk about the idea of having multiple sprites that do things in our game. We're going to talk about using collision as a feature in our game. And then we're going to also talk about keeping track of a score in our game. Okay, so thing one, sprites. If you've used the Scratch programming language, you're probably familiar with the idea of sprites. In Scratch, you get multiple sprites. You create sprites, and they have art that is associated with them, and then they have programming code that's associated with them. And that's really how Scratch works. You add code to a sprite, and that makes it do something. Well, we can borrow that idea. We can use that idea in any programming language that we're using to draw, to make games, because it's a very common idea in video games, because video games usually have things that are interacting on the screen that you control in order to make your game work. In a sense, we already have a sprite in our game. Here is how our game looks right now. And what we are able to do is make this turtle move around. And right now it doesn't do much that's game-like. It does have an animation associated with it. That's great. It can't move back. It can't go backwards. Once it's moving in a direction, it can only turn, to its left or to its right using the arrow keys. And it stops when it gets to a wall. The wall is keeping it from going outside. Okay, so these are the things that our sprite does. And this sprite right now, let's call this sprite the head of the snake. So right now, the head of the snake is actually being controlled, or it's actually in our program as the generic turtle. When we import the turtle library, we get a turtle object. The library has created this turtle object for us, and it allows us to send commands to the turtle to make it move around and do the things that we're used to turtles doing. For instance, in this routine, we use the turtle to draw the borders. This routine draws the borders, so this routine doesn't have anything to do with the head of our snake. This happens before the program even starts doing its animations, right? So that shows that we're using this turtle for two different things. We're using it to draw the scenery, but we're also using it to do our animation. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a turtle that was dedicated to just moving the head of the snake around? Why would that be nice? Well, when you look around this program, the word turtle appears in a lot of places. And right now, as I just told you, it's being used for two different things. This is just drawing the background, whereas here we're using it to actually animate the head of the snake. Those are two very different things. Wouldn't it be nice if when we were drawing the background, it was one turtle, and then you'd use a completely different turtle for doing other things? That way, when we looked through the code, we could see some kind of indication that we're using these different objects for different things instead of using the same object for multiple things. Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to use sprites to do these things. So we're going to have multiple sprites to do different things. And we need to have multiple sprites because when we were able to get away with this because we draw the borders at the very beginning of the program, and then we don't need to draw borders or anything like that anymore. So we reused the turtle for the purpose of the snakehead sprite. But in our program moving forward, we're actually going to have to have sprites that do things at the same time. So we need them to exist they can't be in two places at once, so we're going to need them to exist in our program at the same time. So we need to create multiple sprites. Okay, how do we do that? Well, as I said before, we get the turtle object for free when we import the turtle library, but we can create our own new turtle objects. So I'm going to show you how we do that. So I'm going to put a comment here that says we're going to set up the sprites, and I'm going to create a turtle object that we're going to call head, and it's going to be the head of our snake. And the way we create a new turtle is by saying turtle, calling the turtle library dot turtle, and this is a function that creates a new turtle, and it names it head because that's what we've decided to name it. I'm going to also create another turtle called food, and this is going to be another sprite for us. So going over this quickly again, we now are going to have three different turtles in our program: the generic turtle, a sprite called head, and a sprite called food. Three different turtles that all act the same way. They all have the same features, but we're going to use them differently in our program. For instance, I'm going to make the head of the turtle green. And I'm going to make the food orange. Okay, now when I run our program, let's see, I'm going to make the food orange, but I'm also going to say food dot. I'm also going to put the food at 50-50. Okay, so notice what happened here. So we've got the generic turtle that draws the border, which the border is black. Then we've got the head of the snake turtle, which is turned green. And then we've got the food turtle, which is orange, and it's moved over here. But then when the animation starts, it's the generic turtle that is moving forward. So it's still the generic turtle that's acting like the head of the snake. So what I need to do is all the computing code that I wrote to move the head of the snake around, it's still referring to the generic turtle object. So I need to make all this code. I can keep all this code, but I need to make it refer to this turtle, not this turtle. And I do that by changing all of these references to turtle to be referring to the head. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to make all those edits, and then I'll show them to you. Okay, I finished making the changes. And just to show you quickly over on the left here, in the places that I was using the turtle that had nothing to do with the head of the snake, it still says turtle dot. So turtle dot is for all the drawing of the borders. And so after we set up the sprites, all of the responses to user input have to do with changing the behavior of the snake head. So all those changed. And the actual drawing of the animation has to do with the snake head. So those turtles changed to the head turtle, the head of the snake. But this one didn't change because I'm using the generic turtle to keep track of whether the animation is done yet. So you can see that I didn't change this to head, because this doesn't have to do, this has to do with keeping track of whether the game is still running. It doesn't have to do with the snake head animation. So here we're worried about the snake colliding with the wall, so that's why this changed to the head. This didn't change because this has to do with getting the screen so that we can set the background color. This didn't change again because this is the done flag and it's being stored by the turtle. This changed because it has to do with the initial behavior of the snake. And of course these changed because these are checking whether so first of all, I skipped over this one. So this is making the loop continue until the game is done. And this is, for each tick, this is checking the behavior of the turtle so that we can, call the right routine and make the turtle do its thing. Okay, and then of course we check to make sure that we haven't collided with the wall, and then we set the game to done. So that uses, of course, the generic turtle. Okay, so now we have two sprites. We actually have three sprites, but two of them are doing things. One of them is drawing the background, and it's actually also keeping track of whether the game is over. And the other one is the snake head. Notice the different behavior of the snake head. When it turns, it's doing this really slow thing. Why is that? Can you guess why it's acting like that, different from what it was acting like before? It's because before we were using the generic turtle, and we set that turtle's speed here, but we never set the turtle's speed to 0 for our new head sprite. So let's do that here. Head dot speed is 0. Now we get much faster turns. Okay. Now that we're not using our generic turtle to move the to be the snake's head, we don't need to see it once it's done drawing the borders. So let's hide it. So in the routine where we draw the borders, I'm going to add turtle.hide so we don't see it anymore. Oops, I think it's turtle.hide turtle. There it is. So now we don't see it anymore. And now we just see the food. Okay. Okay. So in the final version, in the finished version of our program, of our game here, we are not going to use the trail of the turtle to be the snake's body. We have other plans. And we will get to that when we get to the part of this video series where we deal with the snake's body. But to start out with, what we want for the snake's head is for it to be in its own sprite, but we want it to not be an arrow like this. So we're going to want the snake to be made up of kind of, we're going to want it to be made up of squares. That's how the original old-timey snake game worked. So we can change the shape of the turtles though. So we're going to change the head sprite to be a square. Actually, I think I have to put it in quotes. So we're going to change that to be a square. And for the fun of it, we're going to change the food to be a circle. Probably originally that would also be a square, but we're going to change that to be a circle. And also, because we're not going to want to draw a line behind us with the head of the turtle, we're going to just pull the pen up on the head. Okay. So I just want to make a note that now that I've got these separate sprites, you can see, hopefully you can see how much more it makes sense to have these multiple turtles doing different things. I can talk about changing the way, changing the color of the head of the snake and changing the color of the food. And you can see right in the code what we're doing, because right now the food sprite is an object in our program that we can act on. We act on it by calling its functions, by calling the functions that do different things with it or to it, right? So when I say I'm going to do something to the snake's head, you expect to see head dot something. And when I talk about doing something with the food, you expect to see food dot something. And then the generic turtle is just the original turtle that's drawing the borders and giving us access to the screen and things like that. Okay? It just makes the code easier to read. All right, so if I run it, we're going to see that this is what that looks like. So it's a little bit more blocky, but that's kind of like the original program. So these are our separate sprites. And right now, this is how sprites are working in our turtle program. Now, one of the things that you should know is that Python will actually allow us to control the size of the turtle as well, but the size of the turtle is actually not changeable in Replit, so we won't be messing with the size of our sprites. We can change the shape, but right now we have to accept that we can't change the size. But if you're doing this program on Python directly on your computer with a Python installation, then you don't have that limitation, and you can go ahead and change the size of your sprites if you want to. All right, so this video has covered creating two sprites, and because it's gotten over 15 minutes long, what I'm going to do is consider this part A, and you can continue on to part B once you've taken a break, where we will talk about collision and scoring.